Hello everyone, and thanks for joining InsightsNow May webinar, Why New Products Succeed. Today's webinar will provide key takeaways for success, such as the right framework, how to listen, building emotions into products, following through with the right decision metrics, disrupting consumer habits, and life after purchase intent. Before I move on, I want to remind everyone to partake in the Twitter session during today's webinar. Please use our Twitter handle @InsightsNow with hashtag InnovationSuccess. As with all of our webinars, we will address questions from the audience that were submitted during registration. However, we still strongly encourage you to submit questions during the live event. To do so, please refer to the question feature in GoToWebinar. Anything you enter here will only be seen by the presenters and me. If the question window collapses, you can use the arrows in the control panel to expand it again. Also, at the conclusion of today's webinar, there will be a brief survey that will provide you the opportunity to tell us what you thought of today's topic, as well as what you'd like to see in the future. For those of you new to InsightsNow, we are the leading company for product innovation and development with a passion for understanding the cues of consumer behavior. Uniquely focused on serving the consumer packaged goods industry, our strength is delivering better results faster. Our goal is to help companies maximize insights and minimize costs while accelerating products to market with more success. We have two great presenters lined up for today, Dave Lundahl and Joel Rubinson. Kicking off the presentation will be Joel Rubinson, President and founder of Rubinson Partners, Inc., and new strategic partner for InsightsNow. As President of Rubinson Partners, Joel provides transformative marketing and research consulting. He specializes in metrics for digital marketing insights, social media, shopper insights, innovation, conversation mining, and biometrics. Joel is a prolific author and speaker at industry conferences and also is a current faculty member of NYU Stern Business School, where he teaches social media for brand managers. Presenting alongside with Joel will be Dave Lundahl, Chief Executive Officer and President of InsightsNow. Dave provides strategic product direction to CPG companies while bringing a unique blend of industry experience, having worked both in research and management positions for food and beverage companies, and has served as university professor at Oregon State from 1996 to 1999. He has been an active consultant in the CPG industry for more than 20 years and has just finished his book, which is set to release this fall, Breakthrough Food Product Innovation Through Emotions Research. Thank you, Joel and Dave, for joining us today. I am now going to hand the floor over to Joel.
Okay, thanks a lot. So let's start kind of as a table setter by looking at the IRI Pacesetters report off of 2010 performance. And you know, normally I'm a glasses half full kind of guy, but I want to be a little bit glasses half empty. When I look at this list and I see that there have only been 4 CPG products that were introduced this past year that achieved over 100 million in sales, I just feel like we should be able to do better. I mean, we know there's a high new product failure rate, and we're just not seeing as much success as we really should be able to see. So I'd like us to try and understand, you know, what we need to do differently to be able to get more products over that magic hurdle. So the hard truth is that 80% of new CPG products ultimately fail, don't stay in market for very long. And we need to innovate better. When we look at that list from the Pacesetters report, nearly 90% of the new products on that list are basically line extensions or franchise extensions. So they're pretty close in to what the parent brand is about. Our main metric for new product decision making is purchase intent, and that simply is not sufficiently predictive of an individual's future purchase action, especially important in this age of hyper-targeted marketing via digital touch points. So we need to do better, and I believe we can do better, which is the basis of my relationship with InsightsNow. So why reinvent new product decision metrics? Well, purchase intent-based measures or approaches really are kind of flawed. First of all, they're inaccurate at an individual respondent level, as I just mentioned. Work has been done by leading academics, Frank Bass, who invented diffusion modeling, Vicki Morowitz, a colleague of mine at NYU, that's documented that less than half of those who state positive purchase intent actually eventually go on to buy the product that they were asked about. So, you know, you'd like to be able to ask a question in a survey and feel that you're getting a truthful answer. So there's obviously too big of a leap that's going on for respondents to be able to give us accurate answers. Also, we know purchase intent is culturally biased, which is really important in an era of global branding. For example, any of you who've done work in you know, internationally, if you just look at Italy, for example, purchase intent is so inflated there that it really is hardly useful. Purchase intent-based approaches also require general population samples in general, and a general population sample is not, you know, particularly aligned to the way that people are looking for new product innovation opportunities in an era of digital passion, of communities forming, tribes, in the era of hyper-targeted content. Traditional concept testing approaches aren't adequate for really innovative ideas. In 2004, there was a real foundational piece of research that was done and published by Professor Hoffler on what he called RNPs, really new products, versus INPs, incrementally new products. And what he found was that people were able to respond effortlessly to their interest in buying an incrementally new product, an INP, but really new products, that there needed to be a fairly elaborate phase where they really were able to engage and think through what this product was about, how it would fit into their lives, how it would fit into the, you know, their daily routines and so on. And finally, from the area of behavioral economics, George Lowenstein, who's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, who's a noted behavioral economist and has consulted to Obama and others, did some very powerful work on understanding that and proving that people cannot predict what their choice response will be when they're in a cold state. So hot state means you need something. You're dying of thirst, you need a beverage, or something along those lines. Cold state means I'm asking you about a beverage, but you're not at all thirsty. So people can't really predict their emotional response in cold states, yet that's what we do in traditional concept testing approaches. So we just need to get all of this aligned better to the way people really live their lives and make decisions. So why reinvent new product decision metrics? The conversion of purchase interest into trial really can vary wildly from person to person, but it does so in predictable ways. So in typical purchase intent-based approaches, it's presumed that pretty much the conversion of a certain purchase intent response into a trial propensity is fairly constant. But in reality, that's not the case. Bass and Morowitz, in their separate pieces of work that were published, each found that there were predictable factors that affected that conversion of, for example, top box purchase interest into trial. I've worked on over 1,000 new product ideas from when I was doing this type of testing. I found exactly the same thing. In fact, one of the most dramatic examples has to do with parent brand buyers versus non-buyers in their response to a line extension. The conversion of purchase interest into trial is much higher if someone is already buying the parent brand than if they're not buying the parent brand. So, you know, we can't assume these constant conversion factors. We need to understand that better. From brain science, behavioral economics, we can imagine that there could be a better predictive system where hopefully what we could do is build a model that respondent by respondent is much more predictive of, you know, the true likelihood of that individual to buy the product. And if we understand their behavior and their emotional drivers, it I'm optimistic that we'll also be able to crack the code on media strategies that will most efficiently and effectively allow us to launch those innovative offerings into the marketplace. So I've talked a fair amount about, the world is different based upon, the digital life and the social media life that we all live now. We used to, not that long ago, 15 years ago or so, those channels for communication didn't really exist. And basically, advertising was a one-way communication process, or what's often referred to as a push process. So the traditional model of advertising push being needed to generate awareness, that as a precursor, as a requirement for trial, really seems to be breaking down in an age of, digital age where word of mouth can, can spread rapidly and lead to people becoming aware of ideas through other means. And also, if any of you have been involved with shopper insights research, you probably know that many products can become successful by actually spontaneously being discovered and evaluated right at point of purchase. So there are these other channels for how to get a new product idea across, and those all need to be understood before we can, really presume that we can do much better at creating predictive systems for new product potential. So, we're interconnected via social media. Certain products just seem to sell themselves by generating tremendous buzz. Some of those that are on the list that we'll be talking about as we go through. So, we need to somehow understand this and make these foundational factors in a new approach that's needed. So we need to find a new basis for new product decision metrics that reflects contemporary thinking about innovation in this consumer in control world. Evaluation research also needs to provide a continuous learning loop so that we can evaluate and strengthen the premise of the idea. I'll talk about that in a bit, but if we're doing research that's intended to generate a magic number to be compared against an action standard, there's very little learning. That's just like, do I kill it or not kill it? And in this more contemporary way in which insights becomes an integral part of the innovation team, that's not enough. There needs to be this continuous learning, this commitment to creating a learning organization where insights needs to be at the center of that, of turning that engine. So the other thing about this is if the insights team is doing more than just being involved with go, no-go decisions based upon risk reduction types of research, if the innovation team, if the insights people on the team are involved in those dynamics in a way that will benefit the organization tremendously. So when I started the Research Transformation Initiative when I was the Chief Research Officer at the ARF, we had this amazing meeting that really started this all off where we were talking about listening. And Kim Dedeker, who was really the voice of research for Procter & Gamble at the time, in front of direct competitors in this really small meeting, I mean 15 people or so were in the room, she drew this curve. And she drew this bell curve and said, you know what, 80% of the funding that the projects we're funding are really about evaluation and testing. And we need to rebalance the spending equation. We need to spend more on innovation. We need to spend more on sense and respond towards our existing brands. And, so this became, a very dramatic picture for us. But what was really interesting was when she drew this curve in front of her direct competitors, at least one of the research leaders for one of her direct competitors said, my goodness, we're all having the same conversation. So there's no question that the industry feels a need to do something different than the way we're currently going about purporting to add value to the innovation process. If we're going to spend more effort on building better ideas, if we're going to rebalance the equation and spend more on innovation, and we're going to do this in ways that really reflect very contemporary thinking about, how consumers, break old habits and adopt new ones and adopt new products, then we're going to need testing methods that are aligned to the new ways in which we're creating innovation. If we're centering our innovation concepts on how people live their lives and not on new bundles of features in pre-existing product categories, then the pre-existing testing methods simply aren't going to be aligned with these new concepts for innovation. So really what we need to do is we need to kind of simultaneously engineer a system where we're developing better approaches to innovation, but we're also developing aligned testing methods. So if we're successful at developing those ideas that we've been trying to develop, really hitting the sweet spot of what we were hoping to do, we want the testing methods to be able to declare that. And, so the current suite of methods really aren't aligned in that way, and that's part of the vision that we have. So having said that now, that's kind of the challenge that I'm throwing down to the industry, the hope that I have that we can do better, and the promise I think of doing better exists with what Dave is about to be talking about. So Dave, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Joel. I'd like to start out by reiterating that I think what the conversation that Kim Dedeker and others are having in the industry about putting more resources up front is really where I think is what is, if you look at this list of pace setters, part of the story of what is driving their successes. I think it's not just about putting more resources, but to echo what Joel just mentioned, it's about also not more resources, but better resources, better approaches, some better and more aligned methodologies that allow us to really to understand consumers a little better. So that's what I want to really focus on here. And as well as the next couple of months, a couple additional webinars that are going to follow, is also going to be focusing a lot on the front-end innovation, because it is really, I think, what sets apart the success versus failure is that if you get it right early, you're able to focus resources downstream much better. And I think that's, so if you start looking at this list, what you find is that there are some surprises on here. And if you look at, I guess, one of the examples is Chobani. A couple of years ago, who would have thought, who would have predicted, based on traditional methodologies and measures and metrics, that Chobani would be $150 million in revenue and number 2 on IRI's pace setter list. I mean, that's, to me, it's an amazing story. Also, given the fact that what I read is they've spent in 2009 only $200,000 in advertising, and for the first 9 months of 2010, it spent 0. Which is really amazing story of what is driving sort of this sort of perhaps word-of-mouth approach to research. And so obviously some things are changing, and I think if you look at this list, the question I like to ask is, what's the commonality? And I think the commonality is all of these products are disruptive. They're disruptive in different ways. And so I like to spend the first part of my presentation today is really talking about disruption. Now, if you look at the idea of disruption, trying to get back here, one of my favorite authors is Clayton Christensen. He co-authored The Innovation Solution and coined the phrase disruptive innovation as a process by which a product or a service really starts out very simply at the bottom of the marketplace, but then moves up quickly, displacing competitors. And there's something going on, as in a case in point of Chobani, that was very disruptive. Something was there's a reason for that product was able to take root and quickly move up and displacing competitors. And so, but it's not just about disruption as a strategy that I think is really important to focus, because if you think of disruption as a strategy, it puts the perspective, puts the focus on the product as the source of disruption. But I think there's a better way to think about disruption, and to think about disruption is how are consumers being disrupted in their behaviors that opens the door, creates opportunities for companies to create products. And therefore, you know, as one of the, what is driving success? I think it is more about this pull versus a push strategy that Joel mentioned. Because disruption is really all around us. There's disruption if someone is concerned about their wallet size. You know, maybe they've lost a job, or they're concerned about that. Or maybe the concern is, as a parent, about your kids being overweight. And or maybe the disruption comes from a friend of yours that tells you about a new product that is extremely intriguing to you. Disruption could be something you read in the newspaper. You know, I love this, floss or die. You know, that's a very disrupting statement to people. It gets your attention, and it could potentially become a behavioral driver of change. It could be things that you read on blog sites today, you know, like diet soda, how healthy is it, or something that you actually are seeking out as a parent, how to encourage your kids to eat more healthy. These sort of types of disruption is what Joel was talking about, of this pull versus a push strategy. So if you're going to think about these products and moving from, you know, bottled water to vitamin water, or standard yogurt to Chobani, or perhaps just standard breakfast drinks to Trop 50, you know, each of these products that made this list are there because of more of a pull strategy than a push strategy. Each of these were able to find an area of behavioral that has, where consumers are already disrupted. And so I think at the front end of innovation, to be successful, you need to know how to listen to consumers. What are their sources of disruption that are impacting their lives, making them more open or seeking out new solutions and experiences? For if you can discover those sources of disruption, then it's much easier to focus innovation teams from the front end all the way through the innovation process to get to success. To illustrate this point, since this is the baseball season, is one of my favorite things as a Cub fan, I'd like to build on the topic of this pulling versus pushing and disruption with a baseball analogy. And just like in baseball, you know, the goal is to get your players around home. Same thing with consumers. The more consumers you can get around the bases to home, the more successful you're going to be. And the success starts where thinking about where consumers are initially, prior to any sort of disruption. 95% of all consumer habits with or product experiences are very habitual. And so if you're going to be successful in a new product launch, you need to first be able to find disruption, disrupt those habits, and get consumers to first base. And the best way to do that is find areas and find behavioral white space where people are already disrupted, where they're already seeking out. And that is the goal, I think, of discovery, the front end of innovation, is to find that behavioral white space. Because once you get people into a seeking mode, find people that are seeking, you can more quickly get people to second base, get them to trial by delivering some sort of emotional impact in anticipation of the experience, whether it's through, you know, your promotion strategies or your front package design. And then once people actually trial, it's all about getting emotional impact through the actual product experience. You know, how the package and the product perform, getting them to third base. But to get people to home,
Dave,
go ahead,
before you go all the way around to home, you know, when I looked at this diagram, what it makes me think about is that concept testing is like trying to go directly from home to second base without going to first base. So if you're, for example, if you're, you know, pretty entrenched in your purchasing habits and your shopping styles, you're more sensing than you are seeking. So when I show you a concept for a new product, and I say, how likely would you be to buy this product if it were available in the stores where you normally shop, it's like presuming that you are already in a cognitive decision-making mode when many might not even be in that situation. So I think this notion of you have to get to disruption before you can even get to evaluation and trial, I think that makes this really powerful.
Absolutely. And so the area of, you think of consumer behavior, what is it that creates habits? And it is sensory cues, cues that are in the environment or cues that have been built into the product itself, either through the concept, through what the front panel says as someone sees it in a grocery store or whatever, but also cues that are built into the package contents, how the product is performs as you're preparing it and actually using it or wearing it, or whatever the case may be. And so it's that sort of experience, those cues, is that as you reinforce, as you have a new experience and that reinforcement gets reinforced through repeat use, those cues form the basis for new habits. And so that reinforcement is extremely important. The other thing that's really extremely important today is this idea of dispersion, word of mouth, and other ways in which, like Chobani, didn't have to spend a lot in advertisement to get a huge amount of dispersion through word of mouth. And so, so that is really the story today, where why products are succeeding, getting on that pace setter list and other lists as well. It is getting around. You need to think more behavior. You need a behavioral-driven approach to innovation to be more successful. So if you look at our old methods of predicting market impact, as Joel was saying earlier, based on very traditional methodologies, purchase intent, liking, uniqueness, and so on, and an old framework, thinking that this framework is based on models that have assumptions that people behave very rationally, and that they act independently. So that as you then can identify, try to use purchase intent and try to relate that to then some propensity to buy or to act, and then you just roll this up into some sort of volumetric estimate, these sort of methodologies, approach for making decisions really are not very predictive, especially for very innovative, new, novel type of products. So what we've been doing at InsightsNow, is really taken a much more holistic approach. And we've been talking about this. We've actually published on this for several years, been working on methodologies that are more holistic, getting people into those, as Joel mentioned, hot states or context-specific moments. And where choice or other sort of measures have some more emotional basis to them. And then a new framework, which I'm going to talk about a little more specific here in a minute, that is able to take that type of information and build some new models. And these new models are based on going around from home base and hitting a home run with each consumer. Disruption, understanding the impact of emotional choices rather than rational choices. This idea that people act as herding creatures, this sort of driving the dispersion model. Much better way of getting to better decision making to drive success. The new framework I'm talking about is something that we have been developing for some time, and it's a framework that, as Joel mentioned earlier, is more based on behavioral psychology, more based on that sort of brain science and behavioral economics that are being shown to be so much more important. And this new framework has some different language for innovation, different way of thinking about innovation, such as the idea, the definition of a behavior driver. And a behavior driver is a concern in context when people have that really is disruptive. something that in that context is driving them to consider new choices, to seek out new opportunities. The other new sort of language is this idea of cues. And cues are sensory aspects of product concepts or packaging or package context that may be perceived either unconsciously or consciously, and that drive our emotions, that really drive us to feel towards or away to the various choices or various different behavior, consumer behaviors that we have can make. And actually, I'm going to go back to one more thing. And in addition to that, in the middle, you see this area of emotions in this quadrant, these 4 quadrants: functional, sensory, social, and psychological. And what this is really focusing on the experience, where the behavioral drivers and the cues both kind of map to different ways in which we can impact people on a more emotional basis and disrupt them behaviorally and much more effectively. And so this sort of product development is much more about, than in this framework, about how to build cues into products that elicit emotional impact. Marketing is much more about identifying, especially at the front end innovation, what are the key behavioral drivers that lead to the areas here of this sort of grid that there is greatest opportunity for disruption. Now, going back to the pace setter list, this is the list that IRI characterized as more characterizing what was differentiating of the products that were on the pace setter list, which were not; those were not. And what you see is, taste and variety, health and wellness, convenience, things that are much more focused on what the products are about. And it's really much more about that sort of push strategy. But if you take the, apply the behavioral framework and think about it more in a pull strategy, the question is really, why are these sort of qualities of products leading to success? And if you look at these 4 quadrants of the consumer experience, functional, sensory, social, and psychological, I'd like to go through each of these in detail, because health and wellness and convenience, as an example, both can be linked to different types of emotions that are all about the functionality of the product. For instance, satisfaction or hope, of convenience because a product is bite-sized or handheld, or relief that your concerns or your fears even perhaps about health and wellness can be addressed by products that are natural, organic, have different high fiber content, et cetera, et cetera. And also to think about other things such that are not on that list, like simplicity. What does simplicity mean in terms of product experiences and how they relate to, relief, that a product is simple and easy to use? From a sensory perspective, a lot of those lists from the pace setters' reasons for success were about taste and flavor. But what is it about taste and flavor that really maps to emotional impact? It's really, I believe, it is about the hope, and the framework says it's about the emotions such as enjoyment, sensory appeal, and desire. Hope, enjoyment, for a sensory pleasure through variety and taste experiences. And we should not discount the reason for why are new designs, patterns, and looks on that list as a reason for associated with products that are pace setters. I think it's all about the aesthetics. People are much more attracted to things that are aesthetically pleasing, and we should not discount that. It's really about the desire and the appeal is more driving success than the fact that it's in a new design or a pattern or look. Now, you can go beyond that. If you think about other things that are really behavioral drivers today, and you think about the word variety or natural and organic. And the idea of variety, what is it about? Well, I believe it is about the idea is you can create products or use products that are for you. You can select the variety for you. It's all about, I believe, pride, self-identity, as well as thinking about things in natural organic. What is it about natural organic? I think there's also pride through self-identity or social identity, that you're using products that are that you take pride in, perhaps that you have alignment of values with the brand owner or other people that you aspire to be like or belong to, that also have the same identities, the same social values. And we also cannot discount the qualities of products such as new and different or distinctive that lead to psychological differentiation of products based on the emotions such as intrigue and amusement. Because intrigue is really all about the promise of something new and different, and amusement is when you're actually having a product experience that some incongruency is really created into a solution for you. Also, not on that list is the idea of stimulation or comfort, and how we consumers tend to seek out today products that can change their state of mind, can stimulate them or provide comfort, such as a comfort food. This sort of new way of thinking, I think, is a much more powerful way of looking at products and understanding where is the behavioral white space in which you can, at the front-end innovation, develop new product opportunities. So, to kind of wrap up, I think if you look at success, and to be a pace setter or however you define success for your company, I think it does start at the front end. It starts with the idea of discovery. And what discovery really is about addressing the question, where is there disruption? Where is there disruption in the marketplace? Where is there behavioral white space where habits had both been most disrupted? And we talked about applying the behavioral-driven framework, which we've developed as a different approach. As an approach where marketers and marketing researchers and innovation teams working at the front end of innovation can better understand where that behavioral white space is. But it also creates opportunities for those that are working later on in the innovation process to think about how to build cues into products that generate emotional impact. Joel, do you have anything you want to add about the front end of innovation?
Well, I would just say that you know, the research function really does two broad things. It quantifies the expected and it listens for the unexpected. And you know, quantifying the expected is about, for example, brand metrics and brand performance goals and progress versus those goals, and maybe testing products in a certain way. But listening for the unexpected is where innovation is going to come from. Listening for the unexpected is where you're going to come up with a new situation that you never would have anticipated, that people would be thinking about for the kinds of products you have or the offer that you're thinking of building. So I think that listening is a really important part of developing the occasions that you could be addressing, the concerns that people might have, what the drivers are, and also articulating them in ways that people can really relate to, rather than research speak, which is sometimes attributes that are expressing ideas in ways that aren't really native to the consumer vernacular anymore. So I think the listening part of this is really important.
Yeah, I agree. And we have found that through our research that listening techniques is really the key to the front end of discovery, and through some wonderful methodologies and techniques and tools that are available today to be able to really listen to what's going on through social media research and to understand where that behavioral white space may be, but also going beyond that and applying some new metrics based on what we've learned from listening techniques to be able to start sizing in a new way market potential for disruption. It's a very, very powerful combination at the front end of innovation to discover where to focus innovation teams for success.
There's a company in the New York area that is very successful, and this approach that you're talking about is exactly their formula for success. It's a company called Combe, C-O-M-B-E, and they come out with all of these like very niche-y types of products, like Just for Men or C-Bond, which is a different form of denture adhesive, and this portfolio of niche-y products that they have are, that's what they are. They're finding that small but important space in this landscape that's really is not where people's needs are not really being well served at this point. And so those places in the landscape become points where the opportunity to disrupt is great, where people's needs are very acute, and I'm pretty sure they don't spend very much on advertising, a little bit, but not a lot. And as a result, those products that are just perfectly engineered to address this very niche but acute need, they really kind of sell themselves. So, this approach is really the formula for success that company has been using. In fact, this morning I was with their research director, and I actually had this conversation with him, and he confirmed that. And the other thing he confirmed is that general population purchase intent approaches simply cannot replicate the kind of success that they have, because they don't give enough credit for the passion that people have at finding that type of solution to their needs, and that translation, that higher translation of positive purchase interest into trial as a result of offering exactly the right product. Instead, they just get penalized for the fact that it's a niche opportunity. So that's a reason why we have to be able to capture that acuteness and find these points in the landscape where these products really, they hit on these elements where the products like the Chobanis of the world, which spend almost nothing on advertising, or the Combe products, or others, they just really they get discovered, because they're just so perfect for what people need at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So final, we talked about in this webinar today the whole idea of disruption of consumer habits, and I think it's a really critical message to look at. One of the keys for new product success today. It all starts with understand where, not necessarily how a product was going to disrupt as kind of a push strategy, but to discover where disruption is occurring in the marketplace, in the lives of people, and use that as a basis to drive your innovation process forward, more of a pull strategy. And that requires the right framework, a new framework that is much more behavioral driven, such as the one that we developed and presented today. That looks, some new terminology. What are behavioral drivers? What are cues? What are emotions? And how do these emotions sort of roll up into these 4 quadrants of consumer experiences? This sort of framework is really, we're discovering, having great success in really helping to look at and understand behaviors of consumers to help to drive success in products. The idea, I can't say enough about listening especially listening through social media today. I believe these techniques that are emerging, the tools that are available today, are just very, very important and creating a new way in which we can rapidly discover what is going on in the marketplace. And by applying the framework to that type of information, it leads to a new way of thinking about sizing market opportunities as well. This idea of building emotions into products, this goes beyond the discovery, the front end of innovation, and talks about more getting, how do you get consumers to second base and third base, and eventually the home. So if you can't build products, emotions into products through this idea of what are cues and discover what are cues, what cues can be built into products, then you're really missing the ability to really create impact and differentiate yourself. And then, follow through. It's really about we need a new generation decision metrics that are not so based on, the old frameworks, the old assumptions that people act independently and are so rational. People are not rational. We are, emotionally driven beings, and we act as herding creatures, and we're being constantly disrupted day in, day out, and seeking new opportunities all the time. And I guess there is life after purchase intent. I think we can do better. Anything you want to add to that, Joel?
No, I mean, the other thing I would say about emotions is that emotions are built in to the heuristics that we use to make decisions that enable us to, make decisions without our heads exploding. So if you imagine walking through a supermarket, a typical supermarket has about 45,000 SKUs in it. And shoppers only buy 400 products roughly during the course of a year. That means 99, or even if they consider a few alternatives, 97% of what they see in the store is irrelevant to them. The sensory overload, if you tried to absorb all of that stimulation, the sensory overload would be shocking. And so we have these natural mechanisms that are built in to the way our brains work, largely based upon the way emotions help us to get through that situation, that are really defense mechanisms to keep us from, absorbing all of that, to instantly and subconsciously sift through all of that to what matters. So if you think about that, what that means is that when you introduce your new product and it goes on the shelf, why don't you have 100% awareness? If people are shopping the store and you're on the shelf, you should have 100% awareness, but you don't have 100% awareness because unless you disrupt the cues and the sensing mechanisms that people have, you will not be seen. You'll be on the shelf, but they won't see you. They won't absorb your existence, your presence. So we need to be able to get at all of those sensing mechanisms, those cues, that whole pattern of how somebody gets through a store in 30 minutes and as opposed to 3 hours, and understand what it would take to be disruptive visually, to be disruptive in terms of the message that we're imparting, and why somebody would generate have interest in trying this new offering that's there. So so until we start studying these elements and our ability to get ourselves noticed and to work through the layers that you've laid out, we're just going to be going from home to second base, and that's just not how you play baseball.
Maybe cricket.
Yeah, it's how you play cricket, but it's not how you play baseball.
Good.
Great. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Joel. We're now going to move to our Q&A session. As a reminder, the questions addressed during Q&A are what the audience has posed during registration. We still strongly encourage anybody online to submit us questions, either to info@InsightsNow, or you can join the Twitter session at InsightsNow with hashtag #InnovationSuccess. So moving forward, the first question we have: how are companies successfully integrating shopper insights into new product development?
I guess I'll start with that one. You know, Dave talked about disruption. Well, first and foremost, you need to disrupt the patterns by which people navigate the store and the pattern by which they make decisions when they're faced in front of the, you know, the array of products that exist on the shelf. So how are you going to get yourself noticed? Well, the traditional model is create a really great TV commercial that will build awareness and interest so people will walk into the store looking for you. But we know from Shopper Insights research that, you know, most product decisions aren't really made that way. You know, 50% of brand decisions are made right at the point of purchase in the store. And you know, maybe half of new products that are, or products that are bought for the first time, the shopper makes the decision spontaneously, didn't even know about the product until they happen to encounter it in the store. Now, that might seem like a bold statement, but if you think about the way you buy, you know, new ice cream or, you know, flavors or artisan cheeses, or I mean, there's a lot of products where you have a more explorative type of a shopping strategy. So Shopper Insights helps to give us clues into, you know, what it's going to take to get noticed at point of purchase. And in fact, this way of thinking is really central to the public statements by Procter & Gamble, where they talk about store-back thinking. So it's like their whole thinking about how to create new offers, how to communicate what the offer is about, really starts with how the thing looks on the shelf and how it's going to stand out and be disruptive in some way at the shelf. So really what we're talking about is embracing that notion of disruption. And, you know, the store is one place where you can disrupt, and there are other places where you can do it as well. But that's how Shopper Insights fits in. It's one of the ways in which you might disrupt existing patterns of consumers to get yourself noticed.
You know, I'd like to just add on that is that just think about new and different. How do you build new and different into, so it's a product is known to be new and different. And if you look at the psychological dimension of experience, where I was talking about earlier, that lower right-hand quadrant, and the idea of new and different, that generating intrigue. Intrigue requires, it's really an anticipation of an emotion. So there needs to be something that anticipates, someone that's I'm anticipating, someone needs to be able to know something intriguing about a product, whether it's, you know, the face, front panel, or something that somebody's heard through some other information source. And I think that's that sort of emotion of intrigue is so important in terms of driving. So the words that you use, the color, the shape, you know, these cues that connect to us and create emotional impact, either in anticipating the experience to get someone to trial, or really how a product performs in terms of its, you know, how do you build cues into things in performance. I think it's so important in terms of making a product stand out and be differentiated.
I mean, another thing that I would add is that the nature of the Internet is that it encourages curiosity. It encourages exploration, you know, because you can Google anything, you can just wind up at very unanticipated places as you're Googling things, and you click a link and whatever else you're going to do. So your ability to be disruptive is enhanced by the digital life that we live. And if you've generated any kind of curiosity about your brand and about your offer, that in and of itself is part of becoming disruptive. So be interesting, be something that generates curiosity. Have people want to find you, and that doesn't mean that you're just, advertising in digital, hey, look at me, here's this new brand. It might be that the way in which you generate curiosity is about a particular subject. So for example, Dave was talking about a framework where you start with situations that people might find themselves in that are based upon occasions crossed by concerns. Well, how about content on the web that talks about those situations? How about content that exists within a publisher's site, that's lifestyle oriented and talks about those situations, or meal solution oriented, or whatever. And then from there, if you have an answer to that issue being raised, then you obviously have a way in which people can now get curious about what you are. So, so your opportunity to generate curiosity, be disruptive, is enhanced by digital. So embrace it,
Great, thank you, both of you. The next question is, how can customers tell you what they need when they can't conceive breakout product concepts, for example, many of the Apple products?
Dave, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start on that. That's a great topic because, what the whole idea of being people, being able to articulate. People cannot articulate what a product that they would like or prefer or that would use would look like. It's products, when they see it, it's all about the experience. It's when they experience it, then they know. So in order to get there, we need to use this approach of understanding where people are being disrupted. And it's like, what are the experiences that people have today that fit with various different concerns in situational contexts? And what are the key drivers there? And so where is the area that people are most open to, because they've been disrupted in some way, to seeking out a solution? I think that gets you much more to understanding how to focus on what that domain of experience might be. Once you've identified that domain of experience, then it's much easier to look at that landscape and to start developing, testing product ideas with people that fit within that landscape, and eventually move into development of early stage prototypes and so on that, again, fit within that landscape. But if you haven't identified that area, that landscape up front, where the opportunity, where people are being disrupted, the chances of you actually being able to develop ideas and products that are going to meet their needs, the likelihood is much low. And I think that's why there's so much failure in the marketplace, is our approach, our processes are not thinking behaviorally.
Great, thank you so much, Dave. The next question is, and last one for today's webinar, how can you address success for new categories versus line extensions and line launches versus 2-3 SKU launches?
Well, the one point I want to add about that is that, as I mentioned before, the dynamics of how new product idea testing metrics relate to sales, it's mediated by recognition of brand names. So, for example, one of the key drivers of whether or not somebody might spontaneously buy a new item in the store is whether or not the item still feels familiar to them. So if you have a line extension or a franchise extension of a well-known brand name, it will feel familiar right from the outset. So if you are line extending off of a brand that's very successful, like you're creating Honey Nut Cheerios as a line extension off of Cheerios, it will have almost instantaneous acceptance as long as the features are at all attractive to people. On the other hand, if you're line extending off of a brand that is really small and doesn't have much marketplace acceptance, you will actually hurt your potential versus introducing it as a new brand. So whether you use a new brand name or you use an existing brand name depends not just on the qualitative sense of the fit of what the brand essence is about, but it also just depends upon these, these marketplace calculus factors. So that all has to be included in how you go about going after a particular opportunity that gets discovered through the kind of process Dave was talking about.
Yeah, I'd just add, there's a great article this month in Harvard Business Review, June version, and how P&G tripled its innovation success rate is the title. And they lay out a really important point that I think is, and that is that it's all about the brand, and your front end in innovation to become more, think about this idea of disruption. In order to preceding that whole thought process is your innovation process needs to be aligned with your business strategy, your brand strategy, and your innovation strategy. It means how do you want to innovate? Is this going to be a line extension? Is this going to be, are you evolving the brand into a new category? Are you extending the brand? Or is this a completely new brand? So whatever that innovation strategy really sets the basis for which within that you start really identifying where the regions for disruption are. So I think that if you haven't read that article, it's a really good one. I'd recommend. It's got a lot of ideas in terms of ways in which you can look at your organizationally, as well as some thoughts about research.
Great. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Joel, as well as everybody who's joined us today for Why New Products Succeed. If you'd like more information on today's topic, please email us at info@insightsnow.com, subject line May Webinar, or please dial us at 541-224-0974. Also, as a reminder, please take a brief moment to fill out the survey so we can get your thoughts on today's topic, as well as what you'd like to see in the future. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thanks, Amanda.
Yeah, thank you.